Allan Pease is an Australian author and motivational speaker. Also known as Mr. Body Language, he is the #1 expert on nonverbal communication and establishing relationships. He started out as a musician, then became a successful life insurance salesman, and later developed a career as a speaker and trainer in sales techniques and in body language. Now he is traveling the world to deliver keynote addresses, appears regularly in media worldwide, and advises everyone from business executives and prime ministers to TV presenters, royalty, and rock stars. He has written 18 bestsellers, including 10 #1s, and have sold over 27 million copies. Their monthly relationship column alone had over 21 million readers. We're here today to talk about body language. We're here today to talk about Allan's story of his life and how things have shaped and changed as we've gone on in the last 30, 40 years, and he'll talk to us about that. He's a great author. This is one of his new books. He's a best-selling author and the #1 body language expert out of Australia and indeed internationally. Allan, real pleasure to be here with you.
Terrific. Pleasure is mine.
Super. Allan, I know we can talk about body language as we go forward, but before we get into that, tell us your story. How did it all start? I believe you were an insurance salesman.
Well, for me, it started in the 1950s.
Okay.
Well, my father was an insurance salesman.
Right.
And back in those days, the insurance salesman would knock on the doors and collect the premiums. There were no credit cards and no checks, so they would collect them.
Yeah.
And they'd use that as a form of prospecting.
Yes.
And so my dad would take me out 2 or 3 nights a week when I was a young child, collecting premiums and prospecting, because if you had a 5-year-old with you, you'd always get in. They'd ask you in for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, because there was normally women at home. So I was like a sales prop, I guess. And I spent my formative years as a kid, rather than playing with toys, sitting around the negotiation table with my dad, and he'd tell me in advance what was going to happen. He'd say, now look, if I mention the premium is too high, you'll see them sit back, they might cross their arms, they put their hand on their face. Yeah. He didn't kind of really know how he knew this. He just knew from experience that these things would happen. So I was raised as a kid thinking that everybody did this. Everybody knew that when someone says, you know, I love you, darling, that maybe they didn't actually love you at all. Yes. So I got a job as an 11-year-old in Australia, knocking on doors, selling rubber sponges, and I sold pots and pans as a teenager after school, and I was the champion pots and pan salesman in Australia. Then I joined the life insurance business at 19, and broke quite a few records in that, because I'd had, up until that point, nearly 15 years of experience knocking on doors as a kid. Yeah. And a large part of it is being able to look at somebody and analyse, by their behaviour and their appearance, what could be going through their head and what they are likely to say or not say. And if you've said something, you've asked a closing question in a deal, for example, that watching their response will tell you whether they're likely to say yes or no. So body language makes up most of the face-to-face interactions. It's been a big part of my life of looking at people, and it makes everybody nervous, as you can imagine. I get looked upon as a cross between a psychiatrist and a clairvoyant. And I'm neither of those, but people always think, oh, he's thinking, he's amazing what I'm thinking. He knows my thoughts. I had a woman here yesterday who said, I sat next to her and she knew I had the body language book. She'd been at one of my seminars. And I said, I know exactly what you were thinking. You know? She said, well, why don't you go there?
Oh, wow. Yes, exactly. That's an offer you can't refuse.
That's right.
But do you actually do that? Do you actually meet people and look at them and start analyzing them, just like a dentist or an athlete? Immediately a coach will look at those kinds of things and you instantly pick these things up?
More than the average man, yes, but not as much as the average woman. And that's because, on average, women are 2 to 3 times better at reading non-verbal signals and making sense of them than men, and they're 3 to 4 times better at picking lies than men face to face. Which is why most men can't lie to women very well, and shouldn't lie to women. You ring them up. You know,
I was going to say, we can send a WhatsApp.
Yeah, that's right. Send a WhatsApp or an SMS, but don't front up. You'll die. So I guess it's like a dentist. I spoke at the Dental Association recently, and it was after hours, and they were having a champagne dinner. But as I was talking, I was aware they were all looking in my mouth, thinking upper left occlusal, right bridge, I could fix that, I could change. Then I went to the Hairdressing Association, and they're all looking at my hair. You'd love it there. So.
Absolutely.
You're good at this. They're looking at my hair, so I could change that, I could dye that. So it's like you're never off duty. You really aren't. But for women, overall, most women, it's a natural part of who they are and what they do. They're never off duty.
Yeah. Now, you spoke about the fact that by the time you got your first job at 18, 19, you already had 15 years of experience. Is the modern young person missing out on that apprenticeship, that learning at the feet of masters, learning on the field, and our schooling system has a lot to learn from that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in my era, you were thrown in. You tested the depth of the water with both feet. Is what would happen. They would throw you in deep, and you'd swim or sink. Was the way it was. Now today, in most societies, there are laws in place that allow the fact that somebody can't fall in the water and drown. We're becoming more and more politically correct in most parts of the world, which is stopping some kids from finding out what the reality of life is.
Yeah.
And back in the days when I was working, you worked hard and you got a reward, and if you failed, you knew you failed. Didn't mean you went and committed suicide, but it meant that you would then work out, what do I have to do to move forward next time? And you'd have a replan.
Yeah.
And today there are a lot of safety nets around for the younger people to fall into, so they don't get that same experience that I know you would have had as a kid, where every now and again you do get a bloodied nose. And there's a big positive side to that, not to stick your nose out there like that when you're saying a certain thing.
Yeah. My father said anything that didn't kill you will actually make you stronger.
Well, that's absolutely true, but not very politically correct anymore, and it's very difficult in the workplace to enforce that.
There's a cultural issue in this part of the world, which is that failure is frowned upon, and failure as a learning experience is such a wonderful thing. But kids aren't allowed to fail. They're not allowed to fail at school. They're not allowed to get a bad grade. Then they have to get the best kind of job, and then there's so much. You're sitting next to a beautiful car here. If you don't have a beautiful car and all of those sort of material things, you're actually not achieving, and you're being measured from material aspects. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, failure is an integral part of success, and around 80% of everything you do in any new venture will produce zero results, and sometimes even negative results. And we know if you're in the world of selling, for example, most salespeople know that, and somebody's knocking on the door.
That's a salesperson.
I've already got encyclopedias, thank you very much, and vacuum cleaners. So we know. Well, absolutely. In fact, success, an integral part of it is failure, and around 80% of everything you do in any venture, in any business, and any new idea, 80% at least will eventuate in nothing. You'll get no return, no results, nothing. You might even lose a bit. Now, in selling, which I spent most of my life, I'm a salesman, and I still am. So instead of doing them one by one, I'll do them by the millions. It's much more profitable. Sure. In selling, for example, if I think back to when I was a kid knocking on doors selling rubber sponges, these are just little pieces of rubber that I'd bought from the upholsterers, from cars like this. They had all the rubber left over. I cut it in squares, sell it for 20 cents door to door. And I knew that after school, between the hours of 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, for every 10 doors I knocked on, 7 would open. 3 went home. Out of the 7 that would open, I'd give them my little sales patter. You normally got about 10 seconds to do it before you blow it or make it.
Absolutely.
So I'd give 7 the attempt, and 4 would listen, and 2 would say yes. So I knew that every 10 times my knuckles hit a door, I get 2 sales, I'd make 40 cents. Now, when you understand the concept of that, you become really motivated about any idea or any business. Because, think about this, my knuckles hit the door 10 times, I get 40 cents. So in other words, I get 4 cents, which in 1961 was pretty significant for a kid. I get 4 cents every time I knock on the door. So now that motivates me to want to knock on as many doors as possible. So when the door opens, it doesn't matter whether they say yes, no, go away, or it doesn't even matter if they say I'll buy something. It doesn't even matter if they're not home. Every 10 times my knuckles hit the door, I'm motivated because I just earned 4 cents. So I end up with 40 cents. Now, if you don't understand statistics and the fact that most of your door knocking, when you think about it, I got 2 sales out of 10 knocks. That means that there are 8 things that return nothing. And out of that, probably 2 people on average that told me to go away or didn't want me at their door. But that didn't bother me because I knew every time I knocked on the door I got 4 cents. And so when you adjust your attitude towards that, instead of looking for the 2 sales, I look for the 10 knocks. So when I got that 80% in there that returned nothing, or people might even tell me to go away, it didn't bother me because I knew at the end of those 10 door knocks, I'm going to get 40 cents. And so around 80% or more of anything you do will result in nothing. Now, here's where people get this wrong. They say, well, okay, with 20%, if 2 door knocks are going to return a result and 8 don't, how about I'll just go and look for the 2 door knocks. I won't bother with the other 80. It doesn't work like that. It's like if you're playing, in America, the poker machines. Every time you pull a handle or press the button, it's geared to pay out, say, maybe an average of 1 every 11 times. It might pay out $1.50.
Yeah.
But you don't know where that win's going to come.
Right.
You have to put your money in and pull the whole 11 before you know.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, I'll just wait and just pull the 11th. You don't know. Statistically, most of what you do in life with everything will result in nothing or even a backwards move.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're looking for. You have to go through that to find the 20%.
Yeah. It's a numbers game. And my first job that I got, I actually knocked on 300 doors personally because they said, you will not get a job. I was in England and in the mid-80s, and I said, no, I will find one. And I literally took a book, and one after the other from my directory, and at the end of the day, he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, this is my plan. And he said, are you serious? I said, yep. I started on Monday, it was Thursday afternoon, and by Friday morning I had a job, because he was so impressed with my effort and my determination and my focus that I was determined to win and determined to succeed in this, that I got there. So those are the kinds of my life experiences that I like to sometimes share, is that you learn from these things and then anchor them, and life always we find a way. We find a way
the
through.
interesting thing is you say that, Tarek, that the book, The Answer, which is not out here, but it'll be out here soon, covers exactly why that does work and why it works in the brain. And where most younger people either don't get it or haven't learnt it, or the laws or culture prevents them from doing this, is they don't actually decide what it is they want. Now, the bottom line is, if you decide that you wanted to get a job, I wanted to get a sale, I wanted to do whatever it was, if you decide clearly what it is you want, so clearly you can taste it, then your brain will start to search for the information that allow you to do that, and you won't be deflected or depressed by the 80% around you that keep hitting you from behind and giving you nothing.
Absolutely.
But most people don't clearly decide what they want, and so they're motivated by what happens to them next. And 80% of the time what happens next is negative or produces nothing.
Sure.
So therefore that's why most people are negative or depressed about everything, because they haven't decided exactly clearly what they want. And this is the whole basis of what we did with The Answer when I wrote this book, and I'm excited about it, as you can tell, is that you don't have to decide how you're going to do something. Like, you didn't have to decide about how you're going to get a job. You knew in here and in here, in your stomach, that if you knocked those doors, that job would appear. And it's a bit like, for anybody watching this program, whatever car they drive, everywhere they go, they see that car everywhere. Everywhere they go. So if they drive a gold Lexus, for example, everywhere they go, they will see Lexus cars and gold ones. But prior to deciding to get that Lexus, they probably didn't see any. Because the minute you put it in your brain searches out that information, because there are 400 million bits of information hitting your brain every second, and your brain can't cope with it. It can only cope with around 20,000.
It's the reticular activating system in the brain, which is the filter through which we see things, and exactly how that works.
And most people don't decide what they want, so the RAS, is called, doesn't get the chance to go into operation. You don't have to think about how you're going to get the job, how you're going to get the car, how you're going to succeed. All you have to think about is what clearly it is you want to do. That I'm going to do this, and that's the end of it. I'm going to do it. So people say, how are you going to do that? And the worst ones that try and stop you, your family members. Family. We put a full chapter in there on how to overcome family members, how to tell them to go to hell in such a way they're looking forward to the trip. Otherwise, they will stop you. They will slow you up for what you're doing. You decide what you're going to do, and the minute you decide what, suddenly the answers appear everywhere. Just like the way you decided whatever car you drive, when you decide to get that car, you saw it everywhere. Television, car parks. And now I haven't seen any Toyotas since I arrived here, but I'm sure there are millions of them in the city.
There are.
I've seen Lexus everywhere.
Lexus
I came here at a Lexus. I saw a Lexus. I drive a Lexus. Everywhere I go, all I see is Lexus. There's nothing else. Every second guy, I reckon, in Dubai's got a Lexus. That's my opinion.
Now, when did you decide to actually move away from a job to your dream work, which is being an author and being a speaker? How did that process happen for you?
Well, it was an evolution. I've never really had a job as it was. I always described a job as just over brokers. What it meant. I've never really had a job. The thing about whatever you do for a career, whatever you do for a living, and a lot of people who read The Answer, in fact, we had 50 test readers, and 12 of them quit their job. Because one of the things we say, if you're in any job, as we'll call it, whatever it may be, if you're not waking up every day saying, this is the best thing I could do, I can't wait to get out and do more of this. I know you feel that way, and I feel that way, but the majority of people, more than 80% of people in jobs, don't like what they're doing. They're looking forward to Friday. There's songs about Friday. There's a restaurant, thank God it's Friday. They hate Monday. I don't even know when the weekends are.
I jump out of bed every morning, and I'm tired, sometimes, but I jump out of bed.
You know that there's something good coming, and half the time you don't know what it's going to be. And so that's the key, is that if you're in any anything that doesn't make you feel that way, the first thing we suggest to people is you've got to quit.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean you go and quit tomorrow.
Yeah.
It means you've got to decide that somewhere in the near future you have got to get out of that, because two reasons. One is you're not doing yourself a favour, you're dragging yourself along and wasting your life.
Yeah.
And secondly, whoever you're working for, you're not giving them the best possible thing that they can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bosses need good performance for you, and they're not getting that either.
Yeah.
So you've got to decide that somewhere in the near future to get out of what it is you're going to do. Now, it may not be tomorrow, but it might be in 6 months or in a year or 2 years, or maybe somewhere in the future.
What advice do you give to a young person in terms of how important is body language in business? Because that is your core expertise.
Well, there's two things. First, body language we know accounts for 60 to 80% of all the impact that's taking place between two people.
Yeah.
What you say, the words, things you can write down, accounts for 7 to 10%. So what you say doesn't matter that much. In reality, the way you look, appear and behave, which shows your emotions and what you're feeling, is the most important thing. And business today is not about business first, it's about people. If people buy you, they feel comfortable with you, they like you, they feel like you're not intimidating, that they feel like you probably respect them, that you even like them. If people buy you, there's a good chance they'll buy what goes with you. So the first thing you've got to do in any business and any venture is to get people to buy you first.
Yeah.
And whatever you've got goes with you, because the reverse is true. If they don't buy you, Tarek, as you know, if they don't buy you, they're not going to buy anything that goes with you, even if it's a good idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, how do you get them to buy you? How do you attract them? And what are the sort of basic couple of techniques that we can use to actually bring them in and get closer to you?
Well, the first thing you like to start with is this thing called Handshake.
Yeah.
And very few people have ever had formal training in Handshake. Now, okay, now, how's that feel for you?
It feels a little bit hard.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. In fact,
It's very
when
good.
you and I shook hands together,
Yeah.
my first gut feeling, well, I didn't think about it consciously, was this is going to go good.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel comfortable. Yeah, I think I'm going to go okay. And it's transmitted one of two ways. First is if your hand is more on top, it's an ancient Roman expression called the upper hand. And
Right.
handshaking started with Roman leaders 2,000 years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
where they'd meet and they'd do this.
Yes,
and the guy who was the strongest had his arm there and was said to have the upper hand. So his soldiers got the first dancing, dining, wine and food.
Yeah.
My guys had to wait. So the idea is not to give in to the other guys, so keep
Right.
it straight.
Yeah.
Now, all we've done today is put the fingers below the wrist to make it that
Right.
position. So rather than there, it's good. Because this was originally done crouching,
Yeah.
now it's done standing. So that's the first thing, keep the palm straight,
Yeah.
not with your hand on top, which is intimidating.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know how you know it's intimidating, but you'll feel that you're being intimidated. If it goes the other way and it's a bit soft, you'll think, hello, this guy's a bit weak, and you won't have a respect for me.
Yeah.
The second thing is to give the same pressure you receive.
Yeah.
Now, this changes from culture to culture
Yeah.
and from place to place.
You get the wet lettuce handshake,
Oh,
the wet,
yeah.
wet fish. Yes.
Four breakfast sausages rattling around there.
Exactly.
But it's, if you've got a 7 out of 10 in intensity, 10 being strong and 1 being soft.
Yeah.
Yours is about a 7. Mine's a 7 out of 10. That's why they match straight up.
Right.
But if you had, say, a 4 because you were maybe Indian
Yeah.
or maybe Chinese who have
Yeah.
softer handshakes, I've got to back off 30%
Yeah, yeah.
for you to feel comfortable.
That's
Because if
right.
I give you my 7 and you've
Yeah.
got a 4,
Yeah.
you're thinking, this Western guy is getting a bit pushy and you won't feel very comfortable with me. You're likely to stand further back, give me less eye contact, less likely to touch me, therefore less likely to say yes to what I propose. So there's the start, is just with a handshake, which takes place in less than 10 seconds because new people form up to 90% of their impression about you in under 4 minutes.
Right.
And
As
most-
long as that?
Yeah, well, most of that.
Probably
most of
less
us-
than that.
Well, it is most of us in less than 10 seconds.
That's right,
And then we
yes.
spend 3 minutes 50 confirming our decision whether we made it. Now, whether in first impressions you've made a right judgment or not about something doesn't even matter. You will respond and treat them as though that was true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you perceive them as something that maybe they're not, you will still treat them as though that was true.
Yeah. One of the other things I've always heard about is about open palms, and I have a closed palm people and open palm people, and how does that work? And again, in business life, and what do we need to be aware of?
Well, this is very basic primate behaviour because monkeys and chimpanzees
They do,
use
yeah.
palm signals for the same ways that
Right.
we do. And if you look at monkeys and chimps, and they give us some interesting clues about what the origins of some of these things might be. For example, if a chimpanzee is being threatened by strangers, he doesn't know these other ones, and he's scared they might kill him or hurt him. If he doesn't want to fight, one of the first things he'll do is hold his hands up like this, and he does this. And this is a non-threatening position, so the other guys can see nothing held in his hands,
Right.
nothing under his arms.
Yes.
If his hands got over behind his back, they'll be suspicious about
Absolutely,
him.
yeah.
And that's exactly as it is with humans. If you meet someone, they're talking with you, put their hands behind their back like that, you'll have this nagging feeling. There's something about this person that I'm a spit. You don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You haven't picked that the hands are behind the back. So that means that there are three ways I can use my hands. One is as I'm talking with you as I'm doing now, I've got my palm in an upward position. Now we know speakers who present to audiences like this, where they're putting a proposal or proposition, they have up to 40% more retention of that audience. That audience remembers up to 40% more than when the palms are turned down. When the palms are turned up, where the respondents have to tick adjectives to describe how they feel about the speaker, the palm up speaker gets the best results because of the fact they're showing that they're non-threatening. So it means if you suddenly discover that you're talking with your palm down, you are likely to be intimidating a large percentage of your audience, and the speaker who got the least amount of success, the least amount of deals, was the finger pointer. And female finger pointers had the worst record when trying to convince other female audience members. So if you're a woman with a finger out, you've got to get rid of that, otherwise it's going to cause you tremendous harm. And so what if you suddenly discover your finger's out there, we just squeeze it against your thumb? You see a lot of well-known politicians who now you talk like this. Don't do this in Greece or Turkey because that's a very rude insult. But
I lived there.
You lived there? Okay. That's a good place.
Today we have a lot of lawyers and accountants and people in venture capital who are making big deals all the time. And what are the sort of things that we need to look at? And do you advise people in terms of, body responses and how to read a person? Is that something we can do, and how effectively can we do that?
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at people who sell themselves face-to-face to billions of people, politicians, prime ministers, presidents, chief executives, these are people who, and politicians today, know that it's not about politics anymore, it's about showbiz. That from here to here on TV, if people buy you, that you can say some outrageous things and get away with them.
Sure.
If they don't like you, don't like the way you look, and don't feel good about you say the same thing and they can reject anything you say. Now the good news about this is that most body language happens intuitively and instinctively for most people. Most of us are not aware of what we're doing. And you need to have a camera filming you to even, for some people, to believe that they're doing certain things. They really do. So the first thing is to understand 60 to 80% of impact is done this way. If people buy you, they'll buy what goes with you. If they don't, they'll reject you. And most of what they're deciding in terms of their gut feelings is about the way you look, appear and behave. And a lot of this, particularly in the first 4 minutes, you can control this. You can stage manage how you come across. And somebody's likely to say, I like to be a natural. Well, you're never going to be successful. I mean, some of the worst advice you can give someone, Tarek, someone going for a job interview is, just be yourself. You think of the people that you know, if they just be themselves, they will never get a job. They've got to go in, projecting themselves in such a way that they're selling themselves and likely to get a yes. And here's the secret. Some people say, oh, you mean I've got to fake it? Yes, you've got to fake it. But you've only got to fake it for the first 2 weeks. After that, you'll change your behaviour and gestures. And this is what I do with politicians, with presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, sales staff, with everybody who's got to sell themselves. Is within 2 weeks of changing, say, from holding your hands like this to doing what you're doing right now, the steeple position, just changing that one gesture with this position, people perceive you as that you seem to know what you're talking about, you're in charge of yourself emotionally, you're confident in what you're saying, or if you're talking, I'll do this, which means that you're getting a feeling that I'm confident about what you're saying, I'm confident about what I hear. By changing these positions, within 2 weeks, it becomes a natural part of who you are. Because the body language you've got now is only there because you've done it all your life and you picked it up off your culture, off your family, off your friends, or wherever you came from.
Talking about outrageous, and you just spoke about outrageous politicians, Donald Trump. We have been absorbed by him for the last 12 months.
Who hasn't?
What is it that he's doing in terms of his communication skills? Because he basically lies all the way through and gets away with it. And people know. I mean, people, they're fact-checking, and even then they continue doing it. And to me, he's obviously a master communicator in some ways. What is he doing right in terms of body language to get his communication and his messaging across?
He only has about 5 basic gestures, Tarek, that he repeats over and over. So we're not trying to guess what's going on. And he has a tendency to say exactly what he's thinking, which for a lot of his audience, they're thinking that as well. Whereas Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, she's had 30 years of presentation. She is a perfect stage-produced television identity. She can get up and tell us exactly what we want to hear, look convincing, so half the population will vote for that, because a lot of people don't like to hear the blatant truth. And Donald Trump has a tendency to say the blatant truth. And people don't want to hear the truth usually. They want to hear their version of what they think is the truth and for you to confirm that's true. So Trump's only got about 5 basic gestures, including he starts with the L shape.
Yeah.
And when he starts with the L shape, it finishes up in what's called an ear pinch. It goes to this.
Right.
And this means perfection, precision. It's perfect. So what we are going to do is to change and build the walls in such a way, but it repeats over and over. So we're not trying to guess what he means. We can anticipate what he's going to say because he keeps using that same repertoire. And he tells you to your face, he calls a spade an axe and hits you on the head with pretty much what he does.
Also a lot of repetition. It's, drain this swamp, words
over
and over again.
Over and over again. Just by, the rule of three says, the brain can absorb the same thing 3 times.
Yeah.
On the 3rd time, it gets it.
Yeah.
4th time, it's overkill.
Yeah.
2 times is not enough. So he says the same thing over and over. If you look at politicians in history, they've used that. We'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them on the fields, we'll never surrender. Ask not what your country can do for you. Groups of 3 where they hammer it away. It's good for you, it's good for your family, and it's good for your country. Groups of 3.
Can we translate that into business? Can we actually do that into business life? So if I'm talking to a future employer or a partner or an associate, I do it, I know myself, but I'm not taking your advice on that, should we actually position ourselves like that?
Absolutely. And so when you're summarising a point that you want them to remember about your product, your service, or yourself, you say, and I will do this, and I will say this, and I will do that.
Right.
And you use a chop or a fist at the time to reinforce the point that I believe in you, I believe I can do this, and I know this will be good for you. And people will remember forever that you said that point at that time. Well, if you only said it in one sentence and didn't use reinforced body language, they might not even hear it. I love you, darling. I love you. I love you forever. Any woman's going to remember that as opposed to I love you.
Well, I was going to say, because you
love you, darling.
Yeah, exactly. I'll send you a WhatsApp.
We should meet for lunch.
Talking about relationships, you do a lot of work on relationships. Men don't listen and women can't read maps. Men want sex and women want love. Can you give us some thoughts on that, please?
Well, that was a series of 3 books which, even though body language is the best known thing I'm known for, that's everywhere in the world, the Why Men Don't Listen, Women Can't Read Map series were the biggest sellers, 10 million copies apiece in every language, and people who read that thought it was written in their country, whatever language it was. And the basis of it was very simple. They're the first books of their type to show the differences between how men and women think using brain scans. And they're also very controversial because we're now entering a world where you're not supposed to say that men and women think differently or a man or woman can do something better than the others. But the reality is, if you've had any experience with the opposite sex, you know that they don't think like you. They think differently. Not better or worse, but differently. So, for example, in simple terms, we know that male brains operate on what we call monotracking. Now, I'm talking here about the majority of men in most circumstances. And this is cross-culture. We found in 33 cultures where we did the scans, there's no differences between Indians or Icelandics or Afrikaans. They all behave the same way. Whether they're allowed to think that in their culture is a different question, but they still are urged to do that the same way. The first thing is that male brains are what we call compartmentalised. Like little rooms all over the man's head, and each room has one thing that works in isolation on its own. So in simple terms, most male-brained people, which is about a fifth of women are that as well, do one thing at a time. We do it absolutely well, but we do one thing. So if a guy pulls over the side of the road and pulls out a map, someone's drawn him to get somewhere, the first thing he does is turn the radio off. Now women have seen men turning the radio off forever. Never stop to think, what is he doing? Like radio, hearing, to read a map, navigation. Well, scan the guy's brain, which we did, and you can see he can't do both. He comes to a busy intersection, he has to make a choice of 4 or 5 directions, and you start to talk to him, the guy can nearly have an accident. He can't. You want to make a man cut himself? Talk to him when he's shaving. And my wife Barbara, my significant other, who's my co-author, she knows not to talk to me when I'm shaving because I'm focusing, and she says, darling, you say like, ah! So the strategy that develops out of that is very simple. If you're presenting a proposal, an idea, or a negotiation to a male-brain person, you give them one thing at a time. You don't give them multiple information. Now, female brains, on the other hand, have a thicker connecting cord between the left and right brain, and can have the same function in several parts of the brain. Particularly language. Language has 14 to 16 brain centers for women, whereas it only has 2 to 4 for men, mostly in the left brain. Which means, in simple terms, women talk a lot more than men. And older men know that, we count the amount of words that men and women speak. And we use language for totally different reasons. For example, when women speak, its main purpose is bonding and rewarding. In other words, Tarek, if she likes you, she loves your deal, she loves your proposal, she loves your car, she loves whatever, the first sign is she'll start to unload lots of words for you, not necessarily in related order. Because the purpose of the words is not the content, it's a social glue. If a woman is not liking you, doesn't buy what you're saying, you are to be punished, in fact. She'll withdraw words, she'll stop talking. I'll fix you, I won't talk. And every man watching this has had this, where a woman's not talking to him, and she thinks that she's punishing him.
Exactly. I mean, because if you're thrown out into the living room, it's camping.
It's camping, yeah. Women use silence to punish men. Men love silence. And you want to punish a guy, talk more. Tell him to sit down and discuss his feelings. That's a punishment.
Last couple of questions. Enjoying it too much, we could just go on and on. One of the things which is really affecting the world as we know it today is automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, cognitive computing. So a computer like Watson that's coming in will take away about 90% of our technical requirements. So the 10% that is left over is about humanity and love and connection and touch and feel and all the basic stuff that we're talking about, which will become more and more as we go forward. In your body language and in terms of nonverbal communication and in terms of intuition and those things, it's growing in importance even more than it was in the past. How do you see that transition and that challenge of technology taking over certain parts of our life, but then we have to spend more time developing this side of our life?
Yeah, I mean, automation has been a serious problem for 500 years for people. If you go back to the days in England of the Luddites when they invented the spinning jenny, which up until that point for hundreds of years people would spin yarn by hand. Suddenly they had this wheel that could spin it, which would put 10 people out of work. And so the workers were really upset about the technology. They went on strike, burnt down all the mills to stop that happening. And you'll find today that with technology it's the same. Something new which can replace a lot of people is scary. But the best approach to it is to know it's going to happen and to embrace it and to work out what's the best way that I can make this work for me. Is to run with technology changes. That's the first thing. What was the question again?
The question is, how will this transition, how do we need to change ourselves in this technological transformation?
Well, there's a couple of big changes happening. First is people often think, well, with body language it's not so important now because of the fact that we're doing emails and we don't see people face to face. But for a period there that was true, but now it's going the other way with the Skype type video broadcast programs. We're now seeing people and we're seeing them differently than face to face. See, you and I are looking at each other face to face, but our brain's taking in the whole environment around us. So we're not actually focusing on the face. With a Skype type interview, you're looking at every single blemish on a person's face and you're permitted to stare at them on the screen. That's the difference from face to face. You're staring at them and you're looking. So therefore you have to be really good at reading people's faces. That's what you're seeing, to be good with video calls. That's the second thing. The third thing, and this is a scary thing, is that a new study that came out 9 months ago has shown that Gen Ys, the under 33s generation, have around 10% less connections in the brain that deals with recognising emotions in faces than their parents or grandparents.
Why is that?
And that's put down to the fact that they're looking at a screen. They're not looking at faces. So you and I, for example, and our parents, when they grew up, all they knew was looking at people. And so they spent their life studying faces and working out emotions. And they could tell whether somebody was upset. What it means is that a 25-year-old is less likely than a 45-year-old or 55-year-old to know someone's feeling upset. They can't look at them and see that they're feeling upset. They're less likely just to go right over the top of that person's emotions. And as technology goes on, this is likely to be more and more, that people are likely to become less sensitive to everybody's needs as the future goes on.
Last couple of questions, Allan. And the first one on that is that, as I said, this region is looking for jobs. There are a lot of young people. Over 65% of the population here is below the age of 30. So this is a real issue. 50 million jobs, 100 million jobs in the next 10 years. So there's this tension going on between jobs versus entrepreneurship and being able to create yourself. From your experience, when people come to you and say, Allan, I really want to succeed, what do I need to do? How do I get a job? What are your thoughts on jobs versus entrepreneurship?
Well, a job teaches you what it's like to be at the coalface of something. And I worked a few jobs as a kid. That's where somebody is telling you what to do and how to do it, and that's the learning experience. If you're an inbuilt entrepreneur, which I am and you are, it's a hard place to be. If you're telling you what to do. So a job will give you basic cold-face experience, which you can relate to other people. The difference is, as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are people who not only decide exactly what they want, they create things that didn't exist. They can, and that's why so many people who have ADD and ADHD are such geniuses. The Steve Jobs types, because they can think up things that the rest of us who are normal people, if you want to think, can't think up. So you decide by deciding the minute you decide what it is you want to be, become or have. And this is the secret, is to decide clearly. Don't think about how. This is the thing. Do not think about how. People think about, how would I become a millionaire? How would I build my own business? And they can't think of it, so they don't do anything. They go back to their job. And they spend their life in a job being unhappy, because we know that 80% of people are unhappy in their job. And so decide what it is you want, but don't think about how you're going to get it. And this is so important. The minute you think about how, you can't think about how, so therefore you lose faith and momentum in the idea of it. And to be a successful person as an entrepreneur or in business is thinking about what you do want as opposed to what you don't want.
Any takeaway nuggets for us in terms of non-verbal communication or body language that we could utilize first thing tomorrow morning?
Yeah, absolutely. First is, don't touch your face when you want to be convincing. We know that people who don't tell the truth have an increase of hand-to-face contact, particularly hand-to-nose. This is not true for people who are Asian and Chinese descent. They don't touch their face, they move their feet at a more rapid rate. So if you're talking to Mr. Wong, look under the table, that'll give you a better clue. Face touching, the check's in the mail, of course, that's a good deal. Yes, I like it. Danger is, don't take one signal and say it's got a meaning, take at least three. So if I said to you, it's a good deal, Tarak, you can count on me, you wouldn't believe me. You need at least three signals. So it's a really good deal, sounds good, looks good, and I'll get back to you Monday with an answer. That's a pack of lies. So go for groups, we call them clusters.
Okay. So now we'll get into our rapid fire questions.
I thought that was rapid fire.
No, it is. It was one of the rapid fire questions. The other one would be, what are your thoughts on leadership?
Well, leadership has changed. Leadership historically for the last several thousand or tens of thousands of years has been high testosterone leaders, almost entirely always male, with a flag in front, running along saying, follow me or die. And that's all changed. As the new generation, the leader now is a coach. And the coach runs behind the team and encourages the team to make group decisions, which is a very Japanese and very female type approach to it. So a leader now is a coach as opposed to the guy in front holding the flag.
Your insight on innovation. What do you think about innovation in the world today?
Well, innovation means effectively thinking of things that don't exist. And you've got to decide that's what you want to do. And to stay away from people who won't let you do that. Which the worst offenders are family members, right? Why would you want to put on a television show? What do you call it? Mad, you're calling it. You must be mad to even think of that. And you should go back and get a good job working for the TV station.
That's what my sister says, actually.
They all do that, and they do it because they love you. They don't want you not to be able to pay your mortgage or pay your car or not to send your kids to school. Or alternatively, they don't like you at all. And they want to stop you because you make them look bad, because by you moving forward, they don't. So you've got to remove people from your life that will not allow you to think innovatively. It doesn't mean with family members or those that live in your house, you hate them. It means that you still love them, you just don't listen to what they say.
Is body language and reading non-verbal communication manipulation?
In the sense of the words, yes. Yeah, absolutely it is. Because you're modifying and changing your behaviour to get an outcome and a result. But the reality is, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you've always got. And if your body language doesn't put across positive things to get positive results, you're going to get more and more of that. So you're changing yourself for the better to make yourself easier on the eye with someone, so they'll buy you. And if they buy you, they're more likely to buy what you say.
Could you tell us about your book? I know it's about to be launched. I know it's very close to your heart. What is it about? We'd like to let millions of people see it.
Well, this is the first book of its type that I've written. That again, it's similar. It uses brain scans to show what part of the brain operates to allow you to get what you want in life, to go where you want to go, and to become what you want to become. It also shows why most people don't do those things, and it has to do with the first chapter is the reticular activating system, what we call the RAS, and how that works, how that will drive you forward. And anybody who reads this book will get better at their job, get promoted, or get fired and quit. They'll definitely finish up in a different place, because if you start to read this book, you can expect that you will not be where you are now, and it's very confronting because it makes you responsible for your own life.
Which actually, you must be getting getting people out of their misery by actually even quitting from what they are doing, but doing the right thing. And anything that I may have missed? I know it's been a long interview, but any final comment that you'd like to make?
Well, the thing about being successful is that, and this is one of the things I did with this book, The Answer, is you can become, do and have anything you want. If you make a decision, that's what you're going to do. And this is what most people don't do. They don't decide to become bigger, better, more successful, richer in whatever measurement they've got for wealth. They don't do that. They just stick with the comfortable thing and repeat what they are repeating. And that's why most people don't like what they do for a living. And if you don't, you've got to quit. I mean, you've got to get out of that job. Do yourself a favour and stop wasting your boss's time.
And it's a real pleasure. Thank you
that's
very
a 7
much.
out of 10. I like
That's a 7 out of 10. We can keep going, keep going and see where we end up. Real pleasure, sir.
Pleasure's direct.